The Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon continue to top the charts. In both series, you might know that incestuous relationships are rife. Whether it's siblings whose parents force them to marry each other, or a romance between an uncle and his niece, why is there so much incest in House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones? In today's video, we will share the background behind the Targaryen babies and details about the incest that happened in the Westerosi society. In House of the Dragon, we witness the Targaryens at the height of their power in the age of decadence, and dragons are still very much alive. Likewise, in Game of Thrones, they marry for political power despite being the most powerful family. So why do they still practice incest? Incest is when people engage in sexual activity with their direct family members, like siblings, parents, and offspring. One of the most pervasive cultural taboos is the prohibition against incest. The primary explanation is that Targaryens have a close relationship with dragons, and that dragon control depends on the purity of their blood. Therefore, they risk losing control over the dragons if they lose that purity. Only those with Targaryen ancestry are capable of riding dragons. Therefore, they feel compelled to intermarry to maintain that tradition and their connection to the species. A Targaryen is only sometimes betrothed to another Targaryen. However, if a person marries someone from a different house out of love or to forge an alliance, their offspring will probably be encouraged to wed a Targaryen to purify their bloodlines and keep their Valyrian legacy. Another reason is that Aegon the Conqueror's prophecy predicts the rise of death and cold from the north, and states that a king or queen of Targaryen blood must sit on the Iron Throne and unite the realm for mankind to survive. So marrying within the family strengthens the Targaryens' grip on the Iron Throne and aids them in their mission to one day save the realm from the White Walkers. The central drama of Game of Thrones is rooted in the events bound to the collapse of the Targaryen dynasty. The first episode of HBO's Game of Thrones shocked viewers when it revealed that Jaime Lannister's and Cersei's sibling bond was also sexual. There were also the horrors of Craster and his daughter's wives, the ongoing complexity and twisted love of the Lannister pair, and then the introduction of the main issue of Targaryen institutionalized incest and further disturbingly close family relations. Since then, the topic has somewhat numbed the audience. Like their ancestors from the Valyrian Freehold, members of House Targaryen frequently wed brothers and sisters to preserve their bloodline, manage the dragons, and maintain their Valyrian heritage. Although Targaryens married members of other noble houses of Westeros over the centuries, they still engaged in incest. Consequently, some of them developed mental illnesses as a result of generations of inbreeding. In the Game of Thrones, King Aerys II Targaryen married Queen Rhaella Targaryen, his sister. Thus their three children, Rhaegar, Viserys, and Daenerys, are all the offspring of incest. They are not only siblings, but also first cousins. As a result, Rhaegar is Aerys' only child who has not suffered from the adverse effects of his incestuous bloodlines. As King Aerys grew older, the severe inbreeding caused him to go insane. Viserys also displayed signs of serious instability. Daenerys was believed not to have had the Targaryen madness earlier in life, but later succumbed to it, burning King's Landing to the ground. Although Rhaegar's first wife, Elia Martell, isn't a direct family member, she was still a distant cousin of the Targaryen line. The Targaryens would often at least try to marry cousins if they had no sisters to marry to keep the blood as pure as possible. Rhaegar's last living son and heir, Jon Snow, from his second wife Lyanna Stark, whom he married in secret, had inadvertently begun a sexual relationship with his aunt Daenerys. When they found out they were closely related by blood, Daenerys had no remorse about their relationship and wanted it to continue, but Jon later became more hesitant and rejected her advances. Jon still loves her, even after he's forced to kill her after the Battle of King's Landing. Another example of incest is Queen Cersei and her twin brother Sir Jaime Lannister. They've been having an illicit romance since they were children. Cersei had 3 children from their relationship: Joffrey, Marcella, and Tommen. Family inbreeding did not come without costs, as this incestuous bloodline has produced severe mental health defects in Joffrey. He was a sadistic, cruel, and short-tempered sociopath. Marcella and Tommen defied the odds and had no mental health problems. Although Tywin Lannister's marriage to his first cousin, Joanna Lannister, is not incest in Westerosi culture, this has made their children, Jaime, Tyrion, and Cersei, not only siblings, but second cousins to one another. Technically, this also makes Joffrey, Tommen, and Marcella siblings, and first cousins and third cousins. There is also an incident where Cersei enters into a sexual relationship with her first cousin, Lancel Lannister, when House Stark captures Jaime. Another case of incest in Game of Thrones, which is also quite disturbing, is that of Craster and his daughters. Craster was a wilding who lived in a fortified homestead beyond the North Wall, along with his daughters and wives. When his daughters grew old enough, he married them and then incestuously fathered new children with them. Incest was not acceptable within the faith of the Seven, and inbred children were regarded as abominations, which corresponds with how despised Jaime and Cersei Lannister's relationship was in Game of Thrones. Incest has been a notable theme throughout the Game of Thrones franchise. Over a decade later, House of the Dragon continues this theme, and viewers still can't stop talking about it. Game of Thrones prequel House of the Dragon is full of incestuous relationships. Viewers may have noticed that several characters in House of the Dragon are married to their siblings and/or cousins. The Targaryens have been inbreeding to keep their bloodlines pure and be able to control dragons. While incest was still unlawful during Aegon's time, he and his sister wives were given a free pass. This continued for the next generations that came after them. House of the Dragon begins with King Viserys' reign. His parents, Alyssa Targaryen and Balon, were siblings who were also the children of incestuous rulers Jaehaerys I and Alysanne, his sister. Viserys then married Aemma Arryn, his first cousin. Rhaenyra was married to Laenor Velaryon, her cousin. Alicent Hightower betrothed her son Aegon to her daughter Helaena. Laenor has fled with his lover Carl Corey to Essos, and Rhaenyra marries her uncle Daemon. Daemon Targaryen slept with his niece Rhaenyra and even had babies due to their incestuous relationship. This happened after the funeral of Daemon's second wife, who was also his niece. House of the Dragon viewers were left feeling seriously disgusted, having found an incestuous storyline between Daemon and Rhaenyra as she was still a teenager. The marriage of Rhaenyra and Daemon Targaryen in House of the Dragon confirms the prequel wants audiences to cheer for and actively invest in incest far more than in the Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones, on the other hand, generally worked against incest. Its most significant romance was between Cersei and Jaime, but they became increasingly villainous, making audiences want them to be apart. Even from the beginning, their affair was presented as far more of an illegal act that shouldn't be encouraged, eliciting a far more natural reaction to the notion. Similarly, the story of Craster, who married his daughters, was also very gruesome. Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon may be set in Westeros, but they take very different approaches to incest. That, however, is not as simple as it first appears because the main religions of Game of Thrones, the Old Gods and the Faith of the Seven, still view it as taboo and a grave sin even in the era of the House of the Dragon. Although the Targaryens are seen as different, Cersei and Jaime's romance is just as forbidden as in the Game of Thrones. King Jaehaerys was the reigning king before Viserys, appealed to the faith leadership, and obtained an exception for his family. In other words, Westeros' rule forbids incest, but it doesn't apply to House Targaryen. Aegon the Conqueror was given a free pass when he arrived in Westeros with his two sister wives. Although incest is considered a sin and an abomination in Westeros for anyone except House Targaryen, incest storylines captivate viewers because they tap into the human desire to see bad things, which is the psychological reason why viewers are drawn to watching relatives hook up in both series. What are your views on the Targaryen incestuous relationships? Comment below.